The desert sun hammered down on forward operating base Tempest like a physical weight, baking the tarmac until heat waves distorted the horizon into liquid shimmer. 6 Navy SEALs clustered near the armory tent, their tactical vests unbuckled in the momentary respite between operations. They passed around a spotting scope, watching the distant rifle range where a solitary figure lay prone behind a Barrett M82. The crack of the 50 caliber rifle echoed across the compound, followed by silence, then another measured shot. Petty Officer Marcus Holt squinted through the scope and snorted. 800 meters. Not bad for a pilot. His tone carried the dismissive edge of someone who'd never seen combat from 30,000 feet, who measured danger in meters instead of miles. The woman on the range adjusted her position with practiced economy, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She wore flight suit sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. Dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. No wasted motion, no hesitation. "What's her deal anyway?" asked Lieutenant Jake Corrigan, the SEAL team's second-in-command. "Some Air Force pogey transferring through?" Holt lowered the scope and grinned. "Rotary wing driver, Apache, I think. Call signs Revenant." The word hung in the air like smoke. Revenant, something that returns from the dead. The kind of call sign that wasn't chosen lightly, that carried weight and history the SEALs couldn't see from this distance. Another shot cracked across the desert. Through the scope, Holt watched the downrange target, a man-sized silhouette at 800 meters, rock backward as the round punched through dead center. "Lucky shot," he muttered, but something in his voice had changed. The figure on the range stood, collected her brass with methodical precision, and slung the Barrett across her back like it weighed nothing. She walked toward the operations center without looking in their direction, her gait neither hurried nor casual, just purposeful. Corrigan checked his watch. "Briefs in 20. Wonder if she'll be there." The compound's loudspeaker crackled to life, summoning all task force personnel to the tactical operations center. As the SEALs gathered their gear, none of them noticed the small detail patch on the woman's right shoulder as she passed 30 meters away, a worn subdued insignia featuring a scope reticle and a single word in Arabic script. They didn't know yet that Revenant wasn't just a call sign. They didn't know about Kandahar. They didn't know about the 17 confirmed kills from Apache gunship 30mm cannons that the enemy still whispered about in the mountains. They didn't know that in 3 hours, everything they thought they understood about long-range precision and what it meant to be a warrior would shatter like glass under hammer blow. The tactical operations center smelled of stale coffee and electronic equipment, the air conditioning struggling against the desert heat bleeding through corrugated metal walls. Major Alina Kovic stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching the SEALs file in with the easy confidence of men who'd never doubted their place in the hierarchy of violence. She recognized the type immediately, competent, experienced, and utterly convinced that combat was a masculine domain where women were novelties at best, liabilities at worst. The briefing officer, a graying Army colonel named Westmore, clicked through satellite imagery on the projector screen. Target package Alpha 79er. High-value individual positive ID confirmed through SIGINT and human sources. Compound location approximately 40 clicks northeast in the Takhar Valley. Alina studied the images with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent years reading terrain from altitude. The compound sat on a ridgeline, natural choke points on 3 sides, clear fields of fire in every direction. Whoever built it understood defense. "Ground assault's a non-starter," Westmore continued. "Terrain's too exposed. Airstrike draws too much attention. We need surgical precision." Holt raised his hand. "Sniper team insertion. We can." "Negative." Westmore's voice cut through the suggestion like a blade. "The HVT has protection. Former Russian Special Forces types. They sweep the likely hide positions twice daily. Any conventional sniper setup gets compromised before you're in position." The room fell silent. Alina watched the SEALs exchange glances, saw the wheels turning as they processed the impossible geometry of the mission. Long-range elimination without conventional positioning. It was a puzzle that didn't fit their training manual. Westmore advanced the slide. New imagery appeared, a different ridgeline farther away marked with range calculations and wind data. Alternative approach, ultra-long-range interdiction from here, 3,400 meters, outside their sweep pattern, outside their threat assessment radius. Corrigan leaned forward. Sir, that's beyond effective range for any standard sniper system. Wind drift alone at that distance is calculable, Alina said quietly. Her voice carried from the back of the room, not loud but absolutely clear. Every head turned. She stepped forward into the light, and for the first time the SEALs saw her clearly. Not tall, maybe 5'7", but with the compact density of someone who'd earned every ounce of muscle through necessity rather than vanity. Her face was angular, Eastern European features that spoke of grandparents who'd survived winters the SEALs couldn't imagine. Eyes the color of gunmetal, holding something ancient and cold. Captain Kovich, Westmore said, you're up. Alina moved to the front, connecting her tablet to the projection system with practiced efficiency. New data flooded the screen, ballistic calculations, atmospheric models, terrain analysis rendered in three-dimensional detail. The shot's possible, she said, but it requires specific conditions and equipment most of you haven't trained with. Holt couldn't help himself. Ma'am, with respect, I've been shooting long range for 8 years. The variables at 3.4 clicks are. Alina's eyes flicked to him, and something in that gaze made him stop mid-sentence. Not anger, not offense. Just a kind of patient acknowledgement, like a mathematician listening to someone insist 2 + 2 = 5. Are you familiar with the Coriolis effect on bullet trajectory? She asked. The question hung in the air. Holt blinked. The rotation of the Earth. Yeah, it's a factor, but at most ranges. At 3,400 meters, the Earth rotates approximately 0.73 meters beneath your bullet during flight time. Alina's fingers moved across her tablet, and the projection screen lit up with trajectory curves that looked more like complex calculus than anything resembling point-and-shoot. Combined with wind drift, temperature gradients across elevation changes, and the Magnus effect on spin-stabilized projectiles, you're looking at 18 distinct variables that must be calculated in real time. The room had gone completely silent. Alina continued, her voice taking on the rhythm of someone who'd taught this material before, who'd broken it down to its fundamental components and rebuilt it into something actionable. The Barrett M82 were using fires the 12.7 by 99 mm NATO round at approximately 829 meters per second. Flight time to target is roughly 5.3 seconds. In that time, the wind doesn't just push the bullet. It creates a three-dimensional drift pattern that changes based on altitude, temperature inversion layers, and terrain channeling effects. She pulled up a topographical map overlaid with color-coded wind vectors. The Takhar Valley creates a natural wind tunnel effect every afternoon between 1400 and 1600 hours. The wind flows consistently west to east at 12 to 15 knots with minimal turbulence above the ridgeline. That's our window. Corrigan studied the data, his skepticism warring with the undeniable precision of the analysis. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Alina's expression didn't change. Kandahar Province, February 2023. Enemy sniper team had a coalition firebase pinned down. They were operating from a cave system 2,800 meters out, too far for counter-battery fire, too dispersed for airstrike. Command said it was impossible. She paused, and something flickered behind those gunmetal eyes, a memory sharp enough to draw blood. I proved them wrong. 3 shots, 3 confirmed kills. The enemy abandoned the position within the hour. The SEALs exchanged glances. Holt's face had lost its smirk, replaced by something harder to read. Respect warring with years of ingrained assumptions. Westmore cleared his throat. Captain Kovich holds the longest confirmed kill by a U.S. military aviator. She's also qualified as a designated marksman, trained at Fort Benning Sniper School during a cross-training program in 2022. Her primary role is Apache pilot, but her secondary specialty makes her uniquely qualified for this operation. Alina pulled up another slide, a weapon system the SEALs recognized immediately. The Che-Tak M200 intervention, chambered in 408 Che-Tak, a cartridge designed specifically for extreme long-range precision. Beside it, specifications scrolled past. Effective range 4,400 meters, muzzle velocity 915 meters per second, ballistic coefficient that made the already impressive 50 caliber look like a blunt instrument. "We'll use the Che-Tak for this shot," Alina explained. "Better ballistic performance at extreme range. The round loses less velocity over distance, maintains stability longer. Combined with the atmospheric conditions in our window, it gives us a 92% probability of first-round hit." Holt couldn't stop himself. "And the other 8%? Alina's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw something in them that made his chest tighten. Not cruelty, not indifference, but the kind of cold certainty that came from making life-and-death calculations in the space between heartbeats. "The other 8% is why I'll be taking the shot and you'll be spotting." The room erupted in controlled chaos. Questions overlapped, voices rising as the SEALs processed what amounted to a complete inversion of their expected roles. Corrigan stood, his voice cutting through the noise. "With respect, sir, this is a SEAL operation. We have qualified long-range shooters who have never attempted a shot at this distance," Westmore interrupted. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd already fought this battle higher up the chain of command. "Captain Kovich has. That's not opinion, Lieutenant, that's operational fact." Alina remained still while the argument swirled around her, her expression neutral. She'd been here before, the moment when men who'd built entire identities around being the best at violence had to confront someone who might be better in a specific, crucial way. It never went smoothly. Some adapted, some didn't. In the end, it didn't matter which camp they fell into. The mission would proceed either way. "Wheels up at 0600, Westmore said, ending the discussion through sheer command authority. "Captain Kovich will brief the shooting team on equipment and positioning requirements." Dismissed. The SEALs filed out, their body language a mixture of resentment and unwilling curiosity. Holt lingered near the door, watching Alina pack up her tablet with the same methodical precision she'd shown at the rifle range. The night before insertion, Alina sat alone in her quarters, field stripping the Che-Tak M200 with movements so automatic her hands could have done it in complete darkness. Each component came apart in sequence: bolt carrier group, firing pin assembly, trigger mechanism, laid out on a clean towel in precise order. The ritual calmed something in her, the mechanical certainty of it, the way metal parts fit together with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Outside, the fob had settled into its nocturnal rhythm. Generators hummed. Distant voices called to each other in Arabic and Pashto beyond the wire. Someone was playing guitar badly in one of the nearby tents, the chords drifting through the thin walls like smoke. Alina's fingers found a scratch on the rifle's stock, a gouge maybe a millimeter deep. She remembered acquiring it. Bagram Airfield, incoming mortar fire, diving behind a HESCO barrier with the rifle case clutched to her chest. The case had taken shrapnel that would have opened her femoral artery. Small miracles in a landscape of constant threat. A knock at the door pulled her from the memory. "Yeah." Corrigan entered, ducking through the low doorframe. Without his tactical vest and weapons, he looked younger, less certain. He carried 2 bottles of water, offering one in the universal gesture of truce. "Thought you might want company." Alina accepted the water but didn't stop working on the rifle. "Here to talk me out of this." "Here to understand." Corrigan settled onto a folding chair, his movements careful, non-threatening. "That story about Kandahar, I looked it up. It's not in any official records." "Classified," Alina said simply. "The firebase was a CIA black site. The operation didn't happen officially, which means I was never officially there." She began reassembling the rifle, each piece sliding home with satisfying precision. "But the enemy knows. They call me Malik Al-Maut in the local villages. The Death Angel, kind of dramatic, but it keeps them nervous." Corrigan watched her hands move across the weapon. "How'd you end up in aviation with skills like this?" For a long moment, Alina didn't answer. The rifle came back together, fully assembled, perfect. She worked the bolt action, checking the smoothness, then set it aside. "My grandfather," she finally said, "Boris Kovich. He was a Soviet sniper in World War II. 163 confirmed kills during the defense of Stalingrad. The number landed in the small room like a stone. Corrigan leaned forward. He trained you. He told me stories. Elena's voice had softened almost imperceptibly. About patience. About reading the wind not with instruments but with the way grass moved, the way smoke rose from distant fires. About understanding that long-range shooting isn't about strength. It's about discipline, calculation, and the ability to remain absolutely still while your heart tries to beat out of your chest. She picked up a photograph from beside her bunk, old, edges worn soft from handling. A young man in Soviet uniform, rifle slung across his shoulders, eyes hard as winter. He survived the war, came to America in '57, worked in a steel mill in Pittsburgh for 30 years, never talked about the war to anyone except me. Corrigan studied the photograph. Why you? Elena's smile was brief, almost invisible. Because I asked. I was 8 years old, found his medals hidden in a shoe box, asked him what they meant. Most adults would have changed the subject, told me war stories weren't for children. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "You want to know what it takes to survive when everyone around you is dying?" The question hung between them. He took me shooting the next weekend. A borrowed .22 rifle can set up on fence posts. Showed me how to breathe, how to squeeze instead of pull, how to let the surprise of the trigger break catch me instead of anticipating it. I was hooked immediately. Corrigan set down his water bottle. And the aviation. That came later. Joined the Air Force at 18, wanted to fly fighters. Vision wasn't quite good enough for the fast movers, ended up in rotary wing. Fell in love with the Apache, all that precision weapon delivery from a platform that can dance in 3 dimensions. She paused, choosing her next words carefully, but I kept shooting on the side. Competition at first, then the cross-training program opened up and I went through sniper school at Bennying. The instructors were skeptical. Corrigan could imagine. The Army's sniper school had a reputation for breaking students, for cultivating a specific kind of warrior that didn't traditionally include women. How'd you convince them? I didn't. Elena's voice hardened slightly. I let the target speak for me. When you can consistently hit a torso-sized target at 1,500 meters in shifting wind, arguments about upper body strength or temperament start sounding pretty hollow. She stood, moving to the small mirror mounted on the wall. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, sun-weathered skin, the premature lines that combat etched onto faces regardless of age. You know what the hardest part is? Not the shooting, not the killing, though that takes its own toll. It's the constant need to prove yourself. Every new unit, every new deployment, I have to demonstrate competency that men with half my qualification level get assumed to have by default. Corrigan didn't respond immediately. Outside, the guitar had stopped, replaced by the low murmur of a briefing happening in the operations center. Finally, he said, "For what it's worth, after seeing your analysis today, I'm not questioning your ability." Elena turned from the mirror. "But you're wondering if I can actually make the shot when it matters, when there's a human being in the scope instead of a paper target." It wasn't a question. Corrigan's silence was confirmation enough. Elena moved back to the rifle, ran her hand along the barrel with something approaching affection. "I'll tell you what my grandfather told me the day before I deployed to Afghanistan the first time. He was 92 years old, dying of emphysema from 4 decades breathing steel mill dust. Could barely walk from his bedroom to the kitchen, but his mind was still sharp." She sat down on her bunk, the springs creaking softly. He said, "Elena, when you look through that scope and see another human being, you'll have a choice. You can hesitate, let empathy paralyze you, and die. Or you can understand that war is not about hatred. It's about duty, about protecting those who depend on you, and about accepting that sometimes mercy to the enemy is cruelty to your own people." The words settled into the silence like sediment. Corrigan met her eyes. "And you believe that?" "I believe that every time I've pulled the trigger, it's been to save lives. Not enemy lives, no, but coalition forces who would have died if that enemy position stayed active. Civilians who would have been killed in a firefight if we tried a frontal assault. That's the calculus." Elena's voice had taken on an edge, not anger but something colder. "You asked earlier about Kandahar. Want to know the full story?" Corrigan nodded slowly. "The firebase had 37 personnel. The enemy sniper team had them completely pinned down. Resupply couldn't land. Medevac couldn't extract casualties. They had 4 wounded bleeding out in the courtyard where nobody could reach them safely. She stared at something beyond the wall, beyond the fob, into a past that still lived behind her eyes. Command told them to hold for 72 hours until a relief force could fight through. The firebase commander knew they didn't have 72 hours. They had maybe 12 before they were overrun or everyone bled out. Alina's hands clenched once, then relaxed. So I took position at 2,800 meters. It was raining, visibility was shit. My spotter, a Marine gunnery sergeant named Reyes, told me I was crazy to attempt it, but I'd done the math, I knew the ballistics, I knew my capabilities. She stood, paced the small room. First shot center mass on the primary sniper. He dropped. Second shot 90 seconds later, his spotter trying to drag the body to cover. He dropped. Third shot 40 seconds after that, the observer who'd been feeding them targeting data. Clean headshot at 2,817 meters. Corrigan's expression had shifted, the skepticism burned away by the stark reality of what she was describing. The firebase, relieved 8 hours later, all casualties evacuated successfully, 0 friendly fatalities. Alina's voice had gone flat, the emotional content compressed into pure fact. The enemy abandoned not just that position but a 15-kilometer stretch of high ground. They didn't know where the shots came from, didn't understand how anyone could reach them at that range. It broke their sense of security. She returned to her bunk, sat down heavily. For 2 months after, enemy activity in that sector dropped 60%. Not because we'd killed 3 fighters, you can always replace personnel, but because we'd killed their confidence, made them understand that nowhere was safe, that distance didn't equal immunity. Corrigan absorbed this, processing the implications. In special operations, the psychological impact of a single action often mattered more than the tactical effect. Terror was a weapon like any other. And tomorrow's shot ends a high-value target who's been coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. His death disrupts an entire network. But more than that, Alina met Corrigan's eyes directly. It sends a message. The kind of message that makes people reconsider whether their cause is worth dying for when death can reach them from distances they can't even conceptualize. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Corrigan stood. "I'll be your spotter tomorrow, and I'll trust your judgment." "That's all I ask," Alina said. After he left, she sat alone in the dim light, one hand resting on the Che-Tak stock. Outside, the desert night pressed against the fob's perimeter like a living thing. Somewhere in the darkness, 3,400 meters away, a man who'd orchestrated the deaths of dozens of coalition personnel and hundreds of civilians was sleeping, secure in the belief that distance kept him safe. By this time tomorrow, that belief would be shattered. Alina picked up her grandfather's photograph one more time, studying those hard winter eyes. "Do vidanya, dedushka," she whispered. "Goodbye, grandfather." She'd need his ghost riding her shoulder tomorrow, the patience of Stalingrad in her bones, the discipline of 163 confirmed kills guiding her hands. The rifle gleamed in the lamplight, all precision and potential energy, waiting, just like her. The Chinook helicopter beat its way northeast through pre-dawn darkness, the twin rotors creating a rhythm that vibrated through Alina's bones. She sat in the troop compartment surrounded by SEALs, their faces painted with camouflage, eyes hidden behind night vision goggles mounted on helmets. The loadmaster's voice crackled through the intercom. 10 minutes to LZ. Alina checked her gear with methodical precision. The Che-Tak secured in its case at her feet, 200 rounds of 408 ammunition distributed across her vest, laser rangefinder, portable weather station, ballistic computer. Each piece of equipment verified, then verified again. Muscle memory from countless insertions, but the adrenaline never quite went away. Corrigan sat across from her, holding the spotting scope case. In the red interior lighting, his expression was unreadable, but his body language spoke of controlled tension. Beside him, Holt checked his M4 rifle with the unconscious efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. The Chinook banked sharply, descending. Alina's stomach lurched as the pilot dropped fast and hard, the combat descent designed to minimize exposure to ground fire. Through the open ramp, she caught glimpses of terrain rushing past, broken hills, dry wadis, the suggestion of a road snaking through the darkness. Impact came suddenly, wheels hitting earth with enough force to rattle teeth. Go, go, go! The SEALs poured out in practice sequence, establishing security perimeter while Alina and Corrigan moved toward their designated position. The shooting hide was a natural formation 200 meters from the landing zone, a rocky outcrop with a slight depression that would conceal their profile from the target area. They moved in tactical silence, night vision turning the landscape into green-tinted ghostland. Behind them, the Chinook's rotors wound up again, lifting off to orbit at a safe distance. The noise of the helicopter faded, replaced by desert silence so complete it pressed against eardrums like physical weight. Alina reached the hide first, dropping prone and scanning the approach. Clear. Corrigan slid in beside her, establishing the spotting position offset by 30 degrees from her shooting line. Standard protocol, different angle of observation, redundancy in case her scope failed. Set, Corrigan whispered into his radio. Copy, came the response from the SEAL team leader, already positioned in Overwatch 300 meters south. Beginning hide construction. Maintain radio silence unless emergency. For the next 90 minutes, they worked in near-total darkness, arranging rocks and dead vegetation to break up their silhouette. The hide had to look natural from every angle, indistinguishable from the surrounding terrain even under close observation. Alina shaped it with the instinct of someone who'd done this before, who understood that survival in long-range shooting came down to being invisible. Dawn crept across the Takkar Valley like spilled blood, red light painting the eastern ridgeline. Alina lay motionless in the hide, eye pressed to the Che-Tak scope, watching the target compound materialize through the distance. At 3,400 meters, the buildings looked like toys, details lost in atmospheric haze and heat shimmer. Corrigan worked the spotting scope beside her, adjusting magnification and parallax. Target compound visible. No movement yet. Alina keyed her throat mic. Copy. Beginning environmental assessment. She pulled the portable weather station from her pack, deploying its sensors with careful movements designed not to disturb the hide's camouflage. Temperature, 32 degrees Celsius. Humidity, 18%. Barometric pressure, 998 millibars. Wind at ground level, 4 knots from the west. But ground wind meant nothing at this distance. She needed to read the air itself, understand how it moved across 3,000 meters of space, changing speed and direction with altitude and terrain features. Alina studied the valley through her scope, looking for natural indicators. Smoke from cook fires in distant villages bent eastward. Dust devils formed and dissipated on the valley floor, their movement patterns revealing wind currents invisible to casual observation. A line of trees along an irrigation ditch showed leaves flickering, stronger breeze at that elevation. Wind call, she murmured to Corrigan. Ground level 4 knots, estimate 10 to 12 knots at mid-range, backing to 8 knots near target elevation. Corrigan input the data into the ballistic computer, a ruggedized tablet running specialized software. Confirmed. Computer recommends 8.2 mils left windage. Alina made a minute adjustment to the scope's windage turret. Each click represented a fraction of a degree, translated across 3,000 meters into the difference between center mass and complete miss. Set. The sun climbed higher. Heat built inside the hide, turning it into an oven. Sweat ran down Alina's back, soaking her uniform, but she remained absolutely still. Movement would create mirage effects in the scope, distorting the image, making precision impossible. An hour passed. 2. The compound showed signs of life. Guards moving on the roof, someone hanging laundry, the mundane activities of a stronghold pretending to be a village home. At 0930, the radio crackled. All stations, this is Overwatch. New vehicle approaching compound from southwest. Alina watched through the scope as a Toyota Land Cruiser bounced along the dirt track leading to the compound. It stopped at the outer gate and 4 men emerged. Even at this distance, Through atmospheric distortion and heat shimmer, she could see they moved with military bearing. Security element, Corrigan confirmed. Target likely to appear in next 30 minutes. Alina's heart rate, which had been holding steady at 58 beats per minute, dropped lower. This was the zone, the state of controlled calm her grandfather had called the sniper's meditation. Thoughts quieted. The world narrowed to crosshairs, wind, ballistics, breathing. 3,400 meters away, a door opened. A man emerged into the compound's courtyard. Alina's finger touched the trigger guard, not the trigger itself. Too early, too many variables still unconfirmed. "Stand by for positive ID," Corrigan said, working his spotting scope's magnification to maximum. White dishdasha, dark vest, beard, checking against reference photos. Alina watched the figure move across the courtyard with the unhurried pace of someone completely secure in his environment. He stopped to speak with one of the guards, gesturing toward the mountains. Sunlight caught something on his hand, a ring, gold or brass, detailed enough to create a signature reflection. "Positive ID confirmed," Corrigan's voice carried absolute certainty now. "That's our target. Signature ring matches intelligence photos. Authorization to engage." Alina's world compressed to the sight picture. The man's chest filled the scope, rising and falling with breathing she couldn't see but could calculate. She began her pre-shot routine, the ritual as automatic as breathing itself. First, wind check. The trees near the compound showed leaves moving in consistent pattern. Smoke from a morning fire rose and bent at predictable angle. Wind holding steady at 8 knots, direction consistent. Second, range verification. Corrigan worked the laser rangefinder, painting the target with invisible beam. Range 3,412 meters. Elevation angle negative 2.3 degrees. Alina adjusted her scope's elevation turret. The internal mechanics clicked precisely, each adjustment mathematically perfect. Third, atmospheric check. Temperature had risen 3 degrees since dawn. Air density changed with temperature affected bullet drag. The ballistic computer recalculated. "Solution update," Corrigan whispered. "Add 0.2 mils elevation." Click. The crosshairs shifted microscopically. Fourth, breathing control. Alina took 3 deep breaths, then settled into the shallow respiratory pause between exhale and inhale. This was the space where heart rate slowed further, where muscle tremors ceased, where the human body became as close to a stable firing platform as biology allowed. The target moved, walking toward the compound's center. Alina tracked him smoothly, the rifle moving as natural extension of her body. He stopped, turned to face east and dropped to his knees. Morning prayers. The realization sent ice through her veins. This man who'd orchestrated bombings and ambushes, who'd sent child soldiers to die in suicide attacks, was praying. The scope showed his lips moving, hands raised in supplication to whatever God he believed sanctioned his actions. Alina's finger moved from trigger guard to trigger. The Che-Tax trigger broke at approximately 1.5 pounds of pressure. Too light would cause accidental discharge. Too heavy would disturb aim. This one was perfect, like everything else about the weapon. Wind holding steady, Corrigan's voice was barely audible. Target stationary. You have green light. Alina's world became mathematics. Bullet drop at 3,400 meters, approximately 73 meters. Compensated by scope elevation. Wind drift, 8 knots from west creates rightward deflection of approximately 6.8 meters. Compensated by windage adjustment. Coriolis effect. At this latitude, approximately 0.9 meters right, already calculated into the solution. Magnus effect. Bullet spin creates additional drift component, factored. Temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, all variables input, all calculations complete. The only remaining element was human. Alina's finger took up slack in the trigger, applying pressure so gradually the exact moment of break would surprise even her. This was the discipline her grandfather had taught her, the patience of Stalingrad translated into modern precision. The target remained kneeling, unaware that death was calibrating itself 3,000 meters away. Alina's breathing stopped in the natural pause after exhalation. Her heart beat once, twice. The crosshairs settled on a point 18 centimeters above the target's head. the aiming point that would account for bullet drop and allow center mass impact. The trigger broke with the crisp snap of breaking glass. The Che-Tacs recoil was substantial but manageable, pushing back into Alina's shoulder with controlled violence. The muzzle blast, even suppressed, was loud enough to echo off surrounding rocks. Through the scope, Alina watched the target for the 5.3 seconds it took for the bullet to traverse 3,400 meters of space. Time stretched became elastic. She saw him lower his hands from prayer position. Saw him begin to turn, perhaps hearing something in the morning air, some subsonic warning carried by instinct older than civilization. Saw the bullet impact. At this distance, the visual effect was almost anticlimactic. The target collapsed without drama, simply folding in on himself as if strings had been cut. One moment upright, the next gone. No theatrical death scene, no cinematic slow motion. Just the instant transition from living to dead that defined modern warfare. "Hit confirmed," Corrigan said into the radio. "Target down. Repeat, target down." The compound erupted into chaos. Guards appeared from buildings, weapons raised, scanning surroundings for threat they couldn't locate. At 3,400 meters, the sound of the shot would have dissipated to nothing, a ghost whisper lost in wind and distance. They would search for the shooter in all the wrong places. Alina worked the Che-Tacs bolt action, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a fresh round. Muscle memory, automatic, even as her mind processed what she'd just done. The spent brass landed in the dirt beside her, still hot enough to smell, burned powder, hot metal, the scent of violence rendered technical. "Secondary targets?" she asked, voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. "Negative," Corrigan replied. "Mission complete, prepare for exfil." But the guards in the compound had found their fallen leader now. Alina watched through the scope as they gathered around the body, their confusion visible even at this distance. One guard knelt, examining the wound, trying to understand what kind of weapon could strike from nowhere. Another spun in circles, scanning the horizon with binoculars, looking for muzzle flash or movement that wouldn't come. They would never find the hide. By the time they organized a search, if they even guessed the correct direction, the SEAL team would be dust on the wind, swallowed by helicopter and distance. "All stations, prepare for extraction," the team leader's voice came through the radio. "END to primary LZ. Move in 3 minutes." Alina began breaking down the shooting position with the same methodical care she'd used to establish it. Spent brass collected and pocketed, leave no trace. Equipment packed in reverse sequence, computer, weather station, ammunition. The Che-Tac went back into its case, secured with straps that wouldn't rattle during movement. Corrigan collapsed the spotting scope, stowing it with practiced efficiency. They'd rehearsed this a dozen times, the choreography of tactical withdrawal, every movement designed for speed without panic. At exactly 3 minutes, they low-crawled backward from the hide, moving with agonizing slowness until they'd cleared the skyline. Only then did they rise to a crouch, moving toward the extraction point in tactical bounds. Behind them, the hide looked empty and natural, another rocky outcrop in a landscape of 10,000 identical features. The Chinook thundered in low and fast, flaring hard at the LZ. The SEALs materialized from concealment, security element collapsing inward as Alina and Corrigan sprinted the final 50 meters to the ramp. She felt exposed in the open ground, target acquisition instincts screaming that she was visible, vulnerable, silhouetted against sky. Then she was inside, the crew chief hauling her up, and the Chinook was climbing, rotors biting air as the pilot executed another combat ascent. The fob fell away below, shrinking to insignificance. Alina found a seat, secured her gear, and only then allowed herself to breathe fully. The mission was complete. The HVT was confirmed dead. The intelligence network he'd core.